Gators Breakdown, episode 98 is ready to go. Florida starts a three-game home stretch with a tough, physical, offensive win en route to a 38-24 win over Vanderbilt. I'm your host, David Waters, here on Gators Breakdown. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SCC. And remember, before we dive in here, remember you can find all your past Gators Breakdown episodes and future episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites or get the links by following Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Also, when you're on iTunes, please rate and review the show. Well, it was a good showing for the Gators. Some offensive fireworks, if you want to call it that. Behind the run game, it was a methodical, dominating performance by the offensive line at times. Can still use some help in pass blocking, especially when Luke Del Rio was in there in the first half. But, that unit's really come a long way since the Michigan game when there was a lot of doubt. And you know what? Maybe Jim McElwain was a little bit right in how much he expected that group to improve and dominate, because since that game, they've gotten better week by week. And in turn, the offense has gotten better week by week, especially behind those that running game and unearthing Malik Davis to tag along with LaMichael Pirine and Mark Thompson. And they have also, we keep seeing it even more. Still like to see a little bit more, but getting Kadarius Toney involved as well, and being able to hit the big play down the field with Tyree Cleveland, something that's definitely been able to be seen the last few games for these Gators. So as we mentioned, Luke Del Rio was getting the start. Didn't turn out so well for Del Rio. He was playing okay. He was playing pretty well, getting the offense in check and getting them going. But, of course, pressure in his face, and he gets hit pretty hard. Lands on the same shoulder that he had surgery on last year, but it ended up being a broken collarbone for Luke Del Rio. We'll have surgery tomorrow on Monday, I believe, and will be out for the rest of the season. So you know what, guys? This is it. This is Felipe Franks' team now. There's no – I pretty much doubt there's looking over his shoulder now. This is his team. There's no Malik Zaire coming to save the day. I think you have to ride or die with Felipe Franks now. He doesn't need to be looking over his shoulder anymore. I don't think he minded so much. If you listen to a couple interviews from yesterday, he had a lot of respect for Luke Del Rio and what Luke Del Rio did in preparation for helping Franks get ready and for, being kind of a coach, another coach for Felipe Franks that he could go to in a way. So, Felipe Franks had a lot of respect for Luke Del Rio, and rightfully so. He even wrote on his wristband at halftime. He wrote Luke on his wristband. So a little bit of class there from Felipe Franks showing towards Luke Del Rio. But I know Luke Del Rio has his enemies on Twitter and the way he cares about himself on social media at times. But you got to feel bad for the kid going in there. He wants to do his best for University of Florida, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, but you never want to see these type of injuries. And you know what? The offense was looking pretty good under him, and you thought maybe it could grow with a steady guy back there, a steady-headed pre-snap guy who could help this offensive line even more. But you feel bad for Luke Del Rio and what he's had to deal with, and another injury to go along with everything he went through last year with injuries. So speedy recovery, hopefully, to Luke Del Rio. And now, as I mentioned, this is Luke Del Rio. This is Felipe Franks' time to ride and show everybody what he has moving forward. This team has found an identity, folks. It's this offensive line, and in particular, the offensive line bleeding into the running game. That's the identity of this team now. It's not a quarterback carry this offense type of team right now. This is a running game, offensive line carry this type of team right now. The run game led by Malik Davis, led by true freshman Malik Davis, is the identity of this team right now. And hey, that's not to throw shade at LaMichael Pirine, definitely, or Mark Thompson. Those guys have done well as well. Thompson, sitting there getting some pretty tough runs. LaMichael Pirine had one of his best games as a Gator, I thought, against Vanderbilt. But Malik Davis is kind of the home run threat, and we saw that of him putting the game away. He's the home run threat that this running game's kind of looking for. Even as good as Jordan Scarlett was at times, and LaMichael Pirine last year, there was the chunk yardage plays weren't there, and that's what you're getting on Malik Davis. We saw it in the Tennessee game where he fumbled, but it was a big, a chunk yardage explosive play that we've been looking for in this run game, and he did it again against Vanderbilt yesterday to ice the game. So that's what this running game's been lacking, and that's what they're getting in Malik Davis, and that's one big difference. Of course, you would get some chunk yardage out of LaMichael P. Ryan, some chunk yardage out of Scarlett, but it was the big home run threat that this run game was missing. Hey, look, and we're seeing that right now from Malik Davis. Defense started slow and then settled down in the second half. The middle of the defense is the problem in pass coverage right now. The linebackers are asked to cover too much. I think Randy Shannon needs to go to a little more nickel look at times, and the safeties are finding themselves out of position right now. If the defensive line is not getting the pressure, then it's asking too much for the secondary and these linebackers to make a play. We need to see some more pressure as well. I know Randy Shannon's style is not to bring a lot of blitz and not to bring a lot of pressure. But when the way you want to do it is not working, you have to adjust. And we've said that many a times when we talk about this offense. It's time to start looking at this defense as well. You have to adjust. If you're not getting pressure by rushing 4, bring 5, bring 6, bring 7 if you have to. I know Randy Shannon doesn't like to do that, but you have to adjust to what you have out there. And this defensive line, they can't go into stretches in a game where they're a non-factor of getting pressure. We've seen it almost in every game this season. Where they just go invisible at times. They're pretty good in crunch time, and they're pretty – and when they really need to come on, but it shouldn't have to come to that. These guys need to put together a whole game, and that would also keep these fourth quarter games where it's been live or die late in the fourth quarter. If this defensive line can control the game for the whole game, maybe we wouldn't be looking at that so much. There as well. So let's dive into some stats and recap the game a little bit from Florida and Vanderbilt. Florida 23 first downs to Vanderbilt 17. Florida 7 of 16 on third downs. Vandy 3 of 13. Big difference there. So while I said the defense struggled at times, hey, on third down they did their job, but they did give up a couple fourth downs. Vanderbilt was 2 of 3 on fourth downs, but hey, Florida 3 of 3 on fourth down conversions. Here we go. This is kind of what we've been waiting for. Florida, total yards, 467 total yards for this Gator offense, led by the running game. Vandy, 310 total passing, or 310 total yards for Vanderbilt. Passing, 249 for the Gators, of 17 to 26 between the two quarterbacks there. And I think, Tony had the one pass as well. So 17 of 26 for 249 total for the Gators. Vandy 18 of 40 after a slow start by Kyle Shermer. 264 yards passing there. Florida yards per pass. This is kind of what I like to see. 9.6 yards per pass. I like that. You would love for that number to be in 8 to 10, even more range. But with the style of this offense and what we're asking these quarterbacks to do, that's a pretty good number there, around 10 yards per pass. Vanderbilt was 6.6 there. Rushing, here we go. That's the big difference. 218 rushing yards for the Gators on 51 rushing attempts, 4.3 yards per rush. Vanderbilt with only 46 yards rushing on 20 attempts with a 2.3 average. One bad thing about this Florida team, 9 penalties yesterday against Vanderbilt for 64 yards. Vandy with only 4 penalties. Neither team had a turnover, and you would think with the way we've seen this Florida team play, if they got 38 points on the board, you would expect some turnovers from the defense. But no, this was the offense scoring all 38 of the points. Of course, and Eddie Pinheiro, a field goal to go along with 5 touchdowns. You have to like that look from the Gators. They're getting better on the offensive side of the ball every game right now. Time of possession, a 12-minute advantage for the Gators, with 36 minutes time of possession to Vandy's 24. Let's dive into some player stats now. Felipe Franks, 10 of 14, 185 yards for an average of 13.2, QBR of 84.6. Luke Del Rio, 7 of 11, 64 yards, average 5.8. So there was a big difference there. Luke Del Rio averaged 5.8 yards per pass. Felipe Franks, 13.2. So about an 8-yard difference there, pressing the ball down the field for Felipe Franks. And also Kadarius Toney, as I mentioned, 0 for 1 there. Looking at that, Kyle Shermer, as I mentioned, 18 of 42, 64. He had 3 touchdowns, though. He's kind of shredded this Gator defense at times when he had time to sit back there and read the coverages. Kyle Shermer ate this Gator defense alive at times. Rushing statistics, Malik Davis, 17 carries for 124 yards, 7.3 yards per carry for Malik Davis. That's what we're talking about in the chunk yardage and the explosive plays from him. 2 touchdowns for Davis with a long of 39 to seal the game. LaMichael Pirine, 15 carries, 58 yards, 3.9-yard average, and 3 touchdowns for LaMichael Pirine. And look, a lot of his, he probably would have had a higher average per carry, but, he had a couple short yardage touchdowns. So it kind of eats away at the average a little bit. Mark Thompson, 9 carries, 24 yards, some tough runs there as well, 2.7 yards per carry. Kadarius Toney with 3 carries, at the Wildcat, 3 carries for 22 yards, another 7.3 yard average for Kadarius Toney. So Toney and Davis both averaging 7.3 yards a carry there. As a team, as I mentioned, 51 carries, 218 yards with a long of 39. Florida shut down Ralph Webb, folks. He's been a Gator killer a little bit, not on the winning end, but he's been one reason that Vandy's been so tough to beat for these Gators. Kind of been the only offense when Florida plays them. He had 11 carries for 29 yards, only 2.6 yards. Average, you know what? That was his average coming in, was 2.6 yards. So his average for the season is going to say 2.6 yards for Ralph Webb. Only had a long of 11 yards. You remember 2 years ago, I think he had like a 75-yard run in the swamp against the Gator defense, a better Gator defense. But, this Gator defense did a really good job of shutting him down. Trent Sherfield and Jamari Wakefield both had 1 carry apiece, both for 11 yards. And as a team, as I mentioned, Vandy only 20 carries for 46 yards. And 2.3 yards a carry. The receiving core, Tyree Cleveland led by yardage there. We'll see how healthy he is coming for the LSU game. Hopefully it's not a big deal. Looks like a toe and an ankle that he's dealing with, so hopefully the Gators can get him back for LSU. 2 receptions for 67 yards along of 49 yards right before halftime to set up Florida there with a field goal to tie it up going into halftime. Morrill Stevens, 2 receptions, 45 yards from the tight end position, averaging 22.5 yards a catch there. He had a long of 29. We'll talk about that later. Mark Thompson out of the backfield, 5 receptions for 39 yards, 7.8 yards average there. Freddie Swain, DeAndre Goolsby, LaMichael Pirine, Brandon Powell, Malik Davis, Kadarius Toney, Keontae Lewis, all with catches there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys with receptions for the Gators. That's what you want to see. You want to see the ball spread around, and that's when this Gator offense is at its best. So as a team, 17 receptions for 249 yards with a long of 49 by Tyree Cleveland there. Vanderbilt, not much to look at there. C.J. Duncan with 5 receptions and 75 yards. He had a long of 24. It was these chunk yardage passes from Vanderbilt that was really eating this Gator defense alive. Duncan had a long of 24. Lipscomb had a long of 28. Sherfield had a long of 28. Tennyson had a long of 35. Blasingame had a long of 21. So, there's that's what kills this Gator defense right now is these chunk yardage. And Vanderbilt didn't have a lot of problem getting chunk yardage. They just couldn't get much going besides that. They couldn't keep a drive going a lot of the time. But the chunk yardage is really where they really hit this Gator defense. All right, now looking at the defensive side of the ball, might be a little bit of a surprise, folks, but Chauncey Gardner and Nick Washington both led the Gators with 6 tackles. You can kind of, if you want to, Chauncey Gardner should have had more, but we know the problems there. But still led the team in tackles with 6. So him, Gardner, Washington, Reese, all with 6 tackles apiece. Gardner with 4 solo, Washington with 3 solo. But as we know, Chauncey Gardner could have had more, but some broken tackles by Vanderbilt and the hit stick from Vanderbilt a couple times showed up there. You had some pass deflections from Chauncey Gardner, Marco Wilson, Duke Dawson. C.C. Jefferson also had a knockdown at the line of scrimmage. But Kylan Johnson, good to see him come back, gave this linebacker, of course, some depth. He had 3 tackles as well. So Kylan Johnson, Fashawn Joseph, Marco Wilson with 3 tackles apiece. Duke Dawson, C.C. Jefferson, Daryl Slayton. Hey, he's coming along well. Jordan Sherritt, who was a force as well on the defensive line, Jabari Zuniga. All those guys there with 2 tackles apiece and some more guys with a tackle going on there. So, really feel like reading a whole bunch of names there, but that's kind of what we got from that Gator defense. So, it was as we mentioned, this defense, they showed up. They showed up in the second half when the team really needed them, and when the offense got its groove going, this defense stepped up and really, clamp down a little bit. So some more stats to kind of extend on those. It was some pretty good stats coming out of this game. Some interesting stats. Pro Football Focus threw out a stat yesterday. The trio of Davis, Thompson, and Pirine forced a combined 10 missed tackles there, and then Pirine missed forced 4 missed tackles and had about 3.6 yards after contact. Malik Davis, and we know the force that he is. 3 forced missed tackles, 5.35 yards after contact there. So that led the team in that statistic. And Mark Thompson, 3 missed tackles as well, averaging 2.89 yards after contact. So, and also Malik Davis, the first running back to have 100 yards rushing since Jordan Scarlett last year versus Kentucky. And, it's kind of, that Kentucky game, you can kind of point to that, but it's also the first time scoring at least 5 offensive touchdowns since the Kentucky game last year. So Gator offense found its groove against Vandy, and it was up until that Kentucky game last year, kind of to the last time we saw an offensive output like that from the Gators. So, on this kind of recap show, I like to do a drive of the game and how it was important in setting up the rest of the game. The game is tied at 17 with 10:41 left in the third quarter. Florida went 3-and-out in its first possession in the second half, and then the defense held Vandy to 4 plays and out. So the offense comes out on their own 27-yard line. Florida got some help on 2nd and 9 when Vanderbilt was flagged for pass interference, and that sparked the offense on this drive. Pirine gained 4 yards on the first down after that. Then the playbook has opened up a little bit more on 2nd and 6, and Franks found tight end Morrill Stevens for 16 yards, and now the Gators are in Vandy territory. Florida then had a 2nd and 10 after that, and Malik Davis finds 5 yards, setting up a manageable 3rd and 5. And on that 3rd and 5, a good play call here, going against tendency, as another handoff is called to Davis, and he picks up a first down by gaining 6 yards. And Doug Nussmeier, he did this a couple times. He called some runs on 3rd downs when it looked like it should have been in a passing situation, but it caught Vandy off guard, and it worked going to get some tendencies here. And it worked for Florida a couple of times when they called it in this game. They ran a couple of those 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 draw plays, delayed handoff plays. I'm not a big proponent of those plays, but when the defense is not stacked and not looking for it, hey, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 in that situation is kind of manageable if you got it. So, I like that. Remember Michigan in the first game ate Florida alive with those 3rd down runs when they were really expecting pass. So looks like, Doug Nussmeier's finding a little bit of tendencies of the other defenses he can take advantage of. So on the very next play, Franks finds Morrill Stevens again for a 29-yard gain down to the Vandy 1-yard line, setting up an easy touchdown on the next play from Malik Davis. So, Franks found Morrill Stevens twice. That was big. So drive took up 356 and 8 plays and gave Florida a lead they never relinquished after that. As I mentioned, Franks found Morrill Stevens twice for a combined 45 yards, getting a tight end involved in the passing game. And Malik Davis came up big as well, converting a 3rd down and scoring the touchdown on the drive. And that drive sparked the whole team. The defense came out and forced a 3-and-out on the very next drive, and then the Florida offense scored again on their next possession, pretty much putting the game away in the third quarter, a quarter where Florida had 136 yards of offense compared to Vanderbilt's 22. So the third quarter coming out after halftime was a big change for this Gator offense and this Gator team in general. We'd like to see a team come out after halftime, make some adjustments, and that's exactly what this Gator defense or what this Gator team did there. So you have to like what you saw coming out of halftime, and a change that we will bring and hopefully can continue on as the season rolls on. Red zone offense. The Gators are 100% in the red zone so far this year. In 4 games, the Gators are 9 of 9 in the red zone, 5 rushing touchdowns in the red zone, 4 from the running backs, 1 from Brandon Powell in the Wildcat last week against Kentucky, 2 touchdown passes and 3 field goals, 9 for 9. Much better than last season when the Gators were ranked 124th in red zone scoring, only scoring about 67% of the time. Look, there's 12 teams left in college football that are still scoring perfect in the red zone, and the Gators are one of them. So let's break down the play calling a little bit in the red zone. Pretty simple, as most of it was, short yardage set up by big chunk yardage and explosive plays. The Gators' first touchdown was set up in the red zone when it was 3rd and 8 on the Vandy 23. Vandy 23-yard line, and Luke Del Rio hits Pirine out of the backfield for a 17-yard gain to the Vandy 6. Two straight Pirine runs later, and Florida finally scores a rushing touchdown for the first time in 10 games dating back to the Georgia game last year. So Florida got in the red zone on this drive, 2 run plays, and they score there. Next one came pretty quick in the red zone as well, as Pirine scores on the first play in the red zone from 13 yards out. 1 play, 1 run. Then right before halftime, Florida set up in the red zone with a 49-yard pass from Franks to Cleveland down to the Vandy 9. Eddie P comes on to kick a field goal from the 4-yard line. So here's when Florida had to pass in the red zone to save some clock, and they couldn't get it done. First and second goal, Franks do incomplete, and then found Thompson for a gain of 5 on third down. If Franks puts that money on the throw, puts that throw on the money, then Thompson has a pretty good chance of scoring in the end zone. Still would have had to probably break a tackle or two, but chances would have been much better there. So that's kind of where they stumbled in the red zone a little bit, trying to pass in the red zone. Had to, but couldn't get it done. Settled for a field goal. Hey, still perfect though, as we said. Next red zone play, of course, as the score was pretty easy, coming from 1 yard out. This is the drive I've talked about. It was a 1-yard touchdown run from Malik Davis after Franks found Morrill Stevens on the 20 from a 29-yard gain there. After that, it was another Pirine 1-yard touchdown run on 3rd and goal. Florida got down to the 2-yard line after Franks to Swain deflection play. You remember that? So, you like to see a better play from Franks. If he hits that on the money, Florida doesn't get a red zone opportunity because Swain's in the end zone easily. But you know what? Good by Swain for concentrating, catching that pass down on the 2-yard line. And Florida has another short yardage red zone goal line touchdown. So if you look at this, you can see the importance of the chunk yardage and explosive plays. Hey, look, it's setting up easier scores in the red zone. That's what it's doing right now. And this Gator team, we've known in years past the struggles in the red zone pretty much since Jim McElwain's taken over. You would thought that would have been one improvement coming from Jim McElwain being the offensive guy, but hey, look, I mean, they're finding ways to get chunk plays, some explosive plays, and that's been a difference in the red zone right now. It's setting up some easy scores. That's what you like to see. Make it easy for this offense any way possible. And explosive plays and chunk yardage plays are what's doing it right now. So we'll have some more episodes. We'll break it down with Bill Sykes later this week, probably tomorrow, and Will Miles will join me as well. We'll have SEC Network's Peter Burns to preview the LSU game with Will and I. So, looking forward to Peter Burns joining us. But yeah, LSU coming to town, and not a pretty LSU. Upsets this past week by Troy. 24-21. Troy went to Baton Rouge and beat LSU. LSU is not a good-looking team right now. Darius Geis did not play in that game, but still no excuse for losing to Troy. Troy out-physicaled them, and if Florida is going to do anything that they can point to from what they've had success in these last few games is running the ball. And Florida should be able to, from what we've seen from this LSU team so far, Florida should be able to run the ball. I mean, Troy's leading rusher had 191 yards rushing on this LSU defense. You have to think Malik Davis, LaMichael Pirine, Mark Thompson, and this offensive line. Hey, look, go put the game on their shoulders. The LSU is proven against Mississippi State and Troy that they're not a very physical team right now. So Florida needs to come out focused, need to come out playing ticked off like you did last year when you went to LSU and the whole hurricane situation. Hey, don't forget that. Yes, they're coming off a loss to Troy, but you know what? Those guys, still ticked you off from the way they acted and played last year. So you know what? Come out of the tunnel and put this game on your shoulders. This Florida offensive line and running back core, we think this is the identity of the team right now. They should want this type of game, and they should want to come out and dominate LSU. I'll wrap up some SEC scores from yesterday, from the weekend. Arkansas beat New Mexico State 42-24. Georgia, tell you what, team's looking good right now. As a whole, their offense, kind of like Florida's, wants to lean on the run game, needs some better quarterback play. But this defense is very, very opportunistic, helping the offense out a good bit. They go to Tennessee and destroy Tennessee 41-0. We'll see what comes out of that for Tennessee and Butch Jones. Not a good look right now. They have a bye week coming up. But Georgia, the hot team that everybody's looking for around the nation right now, goes to Knoxville and beats Tennessee 41-0. Kentucky struggles with Eastern Michigan only winning 24-20. That was a fourth quarter game there. Mississippi State, the darlings of a couple weeks ago, gets handled by Auburn 49-10. Looks like Auburn's kind of starting to find their way with Jarrett Stidham in that offense. They got dominated by Clemson a couple weeks ago, much like Florida got dominated by Michigan in the first week, and now both teams are kind of finding their way. So, it has a lot of moving pieces to the Florida offense and the Auburn offense, and both teams have kind of finding out what they can rely on and lean on as the season goes on. Texas A&M beats South Carolina 24-17. I think South Carolina had a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter of that game, couldn't hold on. And then Alabama destroys Ole Miss 66-3. That train is rolling right now at Alabama, still the nation's best team and definitely the conference's best team. So look at the SEC standings after this. Florida on top with a conference record of 3-0, overall 3-1. Georgia, conference record of 2-0, overall 5-0. Kentucky, then South Carolina, Missouri, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. So Missouri, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, all winless and 0-2 in the conference. They head over to the West. Alabama, 2-0 in the conference, 5-0 overall. Auburn, 2-0 in the conference, 4-1 overall. Texas A&M, 2-0 in the conference, 4-1 overall, followed by Mississippi State, Arkansas, LSU, and Ole Miss. So that's kind of wrapping up the Gators versus Vanderbilt, starting the home stand on the right way. And also the SEC, what happened this past weekend in this conference. And with LSU coming to town, it's going to be a ramped up week in Gainesville. I think SEC Nation from SEC Network announced they're going to be in town. So you could get to go check out Tim Tebow there and Paul Feinbaum and those guys breaking it down. Should be a fun atmosphere. We know, as we mentioned, the whole Florida fans have been ready for this game for a while now after getting the game canceled last year and moved to Baton Rouge, and now we get LSU 2 years in a row. I think Gator fans will be ready for this one. So I'm going to sign off here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. Thanks for checking it out. As we said, more episodes later in the week. We'll have Peter Burns later on this week from the SEC Network helping us break down Florida LSU. So Florida wins. It beats Vanderbilt 38-24. And you know what? This Gator team is starting to find themselves. So I'm David Waters. Thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.